I'm your cult boyfriend. We have some news, everybody. We have some news within the teen drama sphere, the teen drama universe. A One Tree Hill sequel is in development at Netflix. And I just wanted to give my take on this. Give you my thoughts on it. I hope they don't call it Two Tree Hill, but that's not outside of the realm of possibility, is it? I love the original One Tree Hill. I think it's great. I have a whole video series where I analyzed every single season, and there were so many interesting things. Lucas and Peyton, Chad Michael Murray, and Hillary Burton are perfect to me. They're my favorite couple of all time. They're my favorite couple in film and television. If you know, you know, right? The heartbeats, Jose Gonzalez. It's you, the one I want by my side. It's you. Like that shit. I'm about to start crying. The original One Tree Hill was perfect, but I don't think a lot of people are ready to have discussions about this. I don't think a lot of people are ready for the conversations that need to be had when we're talking about a One Tree Hill sequel. As we go through this article by Variety, I'm going to share my thoughts. A sequel series of One Tree Hill is currently in works at Netflix, Variety has learned from sources. Sources say that original series stars Sophia Bush, Hilary Burton, and Daniil Ackles are executive producing the reboot. Ackles will executive produce under her Chaos Machine banner, along with her husband, Jensen Ackles. Becky Hartman Edwards of Firefly Lane and Parenthood is attached to write and executive produce. Not thrilled about that. Warner Brothers Television, which produced the original series, would also produce the follow-up. Bush and Burton would reprise their roles from the show, with Ackles also in talks to return. I would love to know what Rachel Gatina has been up to all this time, man. I'd rather just watch a Rachel Gatina show, and I'm not even memeing right now, I'm being honest. No word yet on if other original series stars would also return at this time. Well, I think it would be basically guaranteed that some of them will, but maybe not some of the important ones. The original One Tree Hill ran for 9 seasons on the WB and later the CW. The cast also included Chad Michael Murray. Now that's going to be a problem, isn't it? James Lafferty, Bethany Joy Lenz, Paul Johansson, and Lee Norris. I think it's safe to say that Paul Johansson will not be returning unless we have some weird kind of dream sequence. But I don't know why we would have a dream sequence or something with Dan Scott if Lucas isn't there. I'm sure James Lafferty will be involved, and Bethany Joy Lenz and Lee Norris. I don't want to see Mouth, but I'm pretty sure they could get Lee Norris involved. The series was set in the fictional town of Tree Hill, North Carolina, and originally focused on the rivalry between half-brothers Lucas Murray and Nathan Lafferty. As their lives began to intertwine and their love of basketball united them, the show grew into a story of friendships, relationships, and family drama. Burton starred as Peyton Sawyer while Bush played Brooke Davis. Ackles played the character Rachel Gatina. I fucking love Rachel Gatina. Like, that's the thing. Like, when I think back on the show, I wish I spent more time analyzing Rachel because I'm like, she's such an interesting element within the show. She's like kind of low-key fascinating. Bush, Burton, and Lenz previously co-hosted the One Tree Hill rewatch podcast Drama Queens. However, Burton stepped away from the podcast after season 6 as her character was no longer in the show. Robert Buckley, who joined One Tree Hill in season 7, is now the third host. Mark Schwahn is the original creator of One Tree Hill. It has no involvement in the follow-up. In 2017, Schwahn was publicly accused of assault and harassment by Burton and a number of the show's cast and crew during their time on the series. The group have spoken at length about the alleged abuse on the podcast. And that's part of the conversation we're not going to want to have. Okay, so what are my thoughts on a sequel? Well, I would be more interested in a completely pure reboot of the entire show with either the same characters or similar characters recast. I'm not saying that's impossible to have with this show because it's like Bush and Burton would reprise their roles. I would assume that they would have like teenage children, right? And I would hope the focus wouldn't be on Brooke and Peyton. Maybe the focus would be more on kids of the next generation. So like a reboot could be possible within this sequel. The problem is I don't think that teenagers would identify with this requel very much. one of the problems with nostalgia driven reboots is that I feel really bad for like Gen Alpha and also for Gen Z, but considerably less because millennials are at the point where we've already experienced our childhood and our adolescence, our teenage years, and now we are throwing money at everything that is offering to sell it to us again. Meanwhile, like Gen Alpha and Gen Z don't necessarily have a whole lot to call their own. You know, they kind of get regurgitated retreads, regurgitated reboots. They get the millennials and Gen X's recycled youth. Gen X and millennials, we liked our youth so much that we'd do anything to experience it twice. We'd buy it twice if we could. What is Gen Z and Gen Alpha? What would they ever reboot? Yeah, if all they're being fed is our stuff. I think that's like a larger, possibly cultural or philosophical issue. And it's partly why I don't like sequels too much to begin with. Reboots could work. I mean, I think Degrassi: The Next Generation is possibly the greatest example of a reboot working. Well, I guess that was a requel because we still had Spike and like if they did it like the Next Generation, I guess if they did it like Degrassi, a requel in that respect, where the focus is entirely on the teenagers as opposed to on Spike or Snake, and in this case, as opposed to Brooke, Peyton, and most likely Rachel. Although I wouldn't mind if the entire focus was on Rachel. That'd be fucking sick. So I guess I can see it working. I think it'd be very difficult to pull off. I think Netflix has a really bad history, a really poor history with reboots, with nostalgia driven projects like what this one is sounding like, the One Tree Hill sequel. I think that the Gilmore Girls: A Year in the Life worked on Netflix, and it's far from a unanimous feeling. I think it worked, and a lot of other Gilmore Girls fans did not think it worked. I think it worked because it gave Amy Sherman Palladino the opportunity to end the story the way she intended. Because the show ended its original run on the CW without Amy Sherman Palladino. And no matter how you feel about A Year in the Life, it's a much more satisfying conclusion than Gilmore Girls season 7. It also allowed Gilmore Girls to complete unfulfilled character arcs and explore certain things that were hinted within the show or that Amy Sherman Palladino always wanted to explore within the series but never had the chance to. There was a lot of justification for the Gilmore Girls Netflix miniseries, and I liked it. Um, we got to see Paris Geller, one of the greatest teen drama characters in history, come full circle and really have beautiful moments. A singularly beautiful moment within the bathroom at the Chilton School, which is a pretty good segue into a problem I think we're going to run into with the One Tree Hill sequel. Paris Geller runs into that bathroom because she's triggered by seeing Tristan Dugray, and she's reminded of being that perpetual, incredible, invisible girl, and she kind of breaks down with Rory in the bathroom. Now, Tristan Dugray was played by Chad Michael Murray. Chad Michael Murray did not return to the Gilmore Girls miniseries. And from what I understand, Chad Michael Murray was on good terms with the people over at Gilmore Girls. One Tree Hill, Chad Michael Murray is not on good terms with everybody. There are certain people that there might not be a way to repair the damage done. I cannot imagine a One Tree Hill sequel without Chad Michael Murray. And considering, and I could be wrong on this, I don't think he ever appeared on this podcast ever. I don't know if he'll be in the One Tree Hill sequel. I don't know if he'll be asked to. And yet I think that he is he was always like the most fascinating, gripping, and captivating part of the series. I loved Lucas Scott. Thought that was incredible, and I don't want to see Peyton without Lucas, right? So like if Peyton is in this show without Lucas Scott, then that kind of ruins a huge part of the original series. Well, let's talk about ruining. It won't ruin it. We will always have the original series. And we can decide on our own whether or not this sequel is canon. We will always have the original series, but if I see Peyton without Lucas, I'm immediately going to turn off the show. Their love story was the most impressive thing about the entire series. And I don't want to see that go unrecognized. I want to see that represented within the sequel. I don't think we will. I don't know if Chad Michael Murray would do that. And I don't know if people like Sophia Bush would want him there. So bigger conversation that's more difficult to have. And I don't even want to have the conversation. But it's about Mark Schwahn. If the show fails, what then? What then? Do we admit that Mark Schwahn was pretty brilliant, creative mind? Like, I never said his name. This is the first time I've said his name on my channel. It's in this article, and it's, I think, entirely necessary to the discussion at hand. I never said his name in any one of my analysis videos out of respect for people like Sophia Bush, for people like Hillary Burton, for people like Daniil Ackles, and people like Chad Michael Murray, too. He was mean and abusive to so many different people on the set of One Tree Hill. And that makes him a bad showrunner. A showrunner has certain responsibilities, and part of those responsibilities are to take care of your cast and crew. And what Mark provided was a hostile and sometimes even dangerous working environment, which makes him, by definition, a terrible showrunner. Now, I think that the show One Tree Hill is really unique because Mark, similar to Joss Whedon's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Joss would reveal a lot of his flaws and insecurities and hangups through the show. Mark, I think, would do the same thing on One Tree Hill, but I think that Mark was a bit more damaged than Joss Whedon was, which provided One Tree Hill with a philosophy that was conflicted, that was contradictory, that was entirely, like I said, unique to interact with. The philosophy behind it was fascinating. And also the music is so definitive, is so it captures the moods and moments so well. I know that Mark was a huge part behind that. It's like Mark understood the cinematic aspects, the poetic aspects of all of these major stories and the arcs within them, and knew exactly how to capture them. And I love that. I love that. Two things can be true at once. Mark was a terrible showrunner, but he was also brilliant. He also provided a brilliant show at the same time. A show with a lot of highs and a lot of lows, but the highs were like ecstasy, and yes, the lows were beyond miserable. But Mark Schwahn was a huge part of One Tree Hill. His DNA is in the show. I mean, you might not want to admit it. No one's ready for the conversation about that. But I think that having a Two Tree Hill, having a One Tree Hill sequel, and it failing, you might be forced to have that discussion. You might be forced to have a discussion about how uniquely brilliant and also unforgivably problematic Mark Schwahn was. You can't erase someone entirely from a project that they're on. Like Gilmore Girls, they brought Amy Sherman Palladino there. I would never expect them to bring Mark to One Tree Hill. He's made so many enemies and he doesn't deserve to be there, right? But also maybe leave One Tree Hill alone or do an entire reboot. An entire reboot. But I think that what should have happened is they should have left this show alone. It was so unique, so special, and so good. Like, this show was great. And no one's going to want to have the conversation about possibly what made it so great, what made it so compelling. It, it might have been Mark. The show's own worst enemy was itself. Now, do I think that Bush and Burton and Ackles and who do they have on as executive producer again? and Hartman Edwards, do I think that they can't provide a show that is at least competent? Yes, of course. But in One Tree Hill, we don't settle for competent. We don't settle for just okay. We don't settle for anything less than outrageously captivating. And to get there, you do need someone who seems to have no shame like Mark Schwahn. And to be honest, I don't want a sequel of Dawson's Creek. I don't think anyone wanted a sequel to Gossip Girl, but I can at least see how that concept was doable, was understandable, because even the end of the original series of Gossip Girl is kind of hinting at a new generation entering the fray, a sort of passing the torch. I don't want to see a sequel to the OC. I don't want to see a sequel to Friday Night Lights. I don't want to see a sequel to The Vampire Diaries. I don't want to see a sequel to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I don't want to see a sequel to Veronica Mars. What I would be interested in would be a reboot of all of these things with new actors, with similar storylines and archetypes, new showrunners, even. Give me a remake. Give me a reboot. Don't give me a sequel. Don't give me a sequel because people like Rachel and Peyton and Brooke have so much power. And I would hate to see their their power that like One Tree Hill and the actors and the writers and creatives work so hard to construct. I don't want to see the power of their characters be degraded. Now, if you're watching this video and you think this is a good idea and you want to have fun with it, go have fun with it. But I want to have more than fun, right? With a One Tree Hill. I wanna kind of cry. I want to gasp. I want to be stimulated. I want to see really cool stuff. I want to see really sad stuff, really crazy and dumb stuff. I want to see things that make me think. And One Tree Hill, the original series, did that. And even if we take away most of the criticisms I provided, Netflix doesn't seem to provide substance. There's a large part of Netflix that feels algorithmically derived. And a One Tree Hill sequel, the concept doesn't have an aura, it has an algorithm, right? People my age are making a lot of decisions um, within entertainment, within popular art. And this is their way of trying to cater directly to us. And we might reward the show with viewership, with watch time, but will the show reward us? No. And do we need to be rewarded by a sequel? Like, is that something we actually need? Like, has the original lost its touch? Or, like, do we really need to know? Because the ending of One Tree Hill was pretty fucking beautiful. The entire montage with you two and everyone's at the fucking basketball game, it was pretty beautiful. I don't need to know anything more than what they've told me. And by the way, they told us a lot within the show. We spent 9 seasons there. I don't need a One Tree Hill without Chad Michael Murray. I don't need a One Tree Hill without Paul Johansson. I don't need a One Tree Hill sequel. I would be okay with a reboot if we got a new cast, new actors as the Scott brothers, and got a new Peyton, a new Brooke, a new Haley, and even a new Dan. We got new ones of all of them. That I'd be fine with that. What I don't need is a sequel because those feelings and that philosophy doesn't need a sequel at all. But if you're looking forward to it, that's awesome. That's great. Um, it's just, and this might be bad too. This might, mm, this might sound, this might be a controversial statement, but based on what I've heard of drama queens and the fact that these people, the actresses, are going to be executive producing the show and having a lot of creative input, uh, based on what I've heard of drama queens, they're not very receptive to the show itself. A lot of people who are involved with projects aren't the best people to actually watch and engage with them. The the parts that I've seen of drama queens, they're not only criticizing beloved parts of the show, parts of the show that the fans adore and appreciate. They're not only criticizing those moments, but they don't even seem to understand those moments. You know, they don't even understand why the audience appreciates those moments so much. They don't even seem to really like One Tree Hill. So I understand that they were intimately involved with the original series, but I don't think that they liked the original series. They didn't like the experience of being involved with the original series, and that's not their fault. But they also don't like the show. I don't think they like the original show, and they're kind of like they seem to, at least according to this early information that we have, they seem to be responsible primarily for the show's creative vision. I don't trust them. I don't trust them. They don't seem to like a whole lot within the show based on their podcast. They don't seem to get it either, which is fine. I don't want Adam Brody and Rachel Bilson to produce an OC sequel. You know, I don't want Leighton Meester and Blake Lively to produce a Gossip Girl sequel. I don't want that. I don't want that. I definitely don't want James Vanderbeek to produce a Dawson's Creek sequel. These people, they're not the best audience, right? They were great actors. They were great within it. But have you seen someone like Adam Brody when he's asked about the OC? He fucking dies inside. It's pitiful. It's really funny, but it's pitiful as well. It's like that level. I don't want to see someone who is low key embarrassed by some of their work within a genre that I think is so important, making a sequel to one of the most important shows within that genre, being One Tree Hill. That might be a controversial statement, but let me know if you guys agree on that. I don't think I'm wrong. I just think it's a difficult conversation to have. Now, this sequel could have some benefits. It could inspire a lot of younger people or even just people my age to either watch the original One Tree Hill for the first time or rewatch it. And of course, when you rewatch it and you go and Google it, you go to YouTube it, you might come across my videos, and I could get some new viewers, and um, maybe people will start looking at these shows in unique and puzzling and sophisticated ways. And once you get into One Tree Hill, of course, it's like a gateway drug. After One Tree Hill, some of these people who are watching it for the first time might seek out Gossip Girl or The OC or Dawson's Creek or Veronica Mars because they liked it so much. Who knows? But those are my thoughts. Not a whole lot of news is broken yet, but I wanted to share them with you because this is interesting news. There just seems to be a lot of issues, right? There seem to be a lot of potential problems with this reboot. So far as all the shows to be rebooted or have a sequel made to it, One Tree Hill, I would have told you would be the last one, I'd guess, considering how dramatic the actual making of the show was. I figured it'd at least be a cast where each member still talk to each other once every couple years, you know? And where the showrunner wasn't exiled, banished from the face of the earth. But I mean, here we are. One Tree Hill. Thank you for watching me.